all I want to do today is just go through the two different courseworks and try and set the scene for you. I think I did something similar at the beginning of the coursework last year. I think it was me. And so I want to do it again just to make sure everybody knows what they're doing. If you want me to scare you, I can do that. Here we go, look at this. If I go on to here, that's the demo schedule. So this is in May. So James Morris is the first man in, lucky chap. I don't know why that is, but it's an alphabetical thing, I guess. Anyway, that's your slots for demonstration. So it's all in the works. The fix is in. The plan is happening. So you're going to have to turn up and show this thing off in the same way you did last time. So we'll have the same arrangement with the same spreadsheet type marking, and I'm going to go through all that now. So this is the form. If you go on to SharePoint and you go into the 101 website and you go into assessments, you will find that there is the spec, there is the marking spreadsheet, which is exactly how we're going to mark where the marks are going to go. I would regard that as your new best friend when it comes to figuring out where the marks end up and what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And then I've also got a couple of archives that contain the application assets and the game assets, of which more in a minute or two. It's all up there. The one thing that we haven't put up there is the actual assessment procedure, the things we will do with your application or game when we actually mark it. But we'll put that up a little bit closer towards the actual due date. But as far as you're concerned, the most important one is this guy, which I happen to have open somewhere, I think, because this is the breakdown of where the marks actually go. So if you're wondering where you're going to get your marks from, we'll do the same as we did last time. We'll sit down with you, we'll open this up, and we'll just go down here and we'll fill the numbers in and talk it through with you in terms of what we've seen and what should be there. Does that make sense? Does that seem fair? So at the end of it, you get your total, and then what happens is that we run that through on eBridge, and you all got your spreadsheets back, didn't you? Have you gone and looked? Okay, if you go on eBridge, you should find that for last year, for 08101, you should have got the actual spreadsheet sent back to you with all the numbers in and the comments on the bottom. Anyone actually seen that? Okay. Oh, one guy. Thank you. That means I'm not going completely crackers. It is up there. So we'll do the same thing again because it obviously seems so valuable. Right. Okay. So the way the assessments work, you'll fill in the entire system. You build the system. You will then zip up your entire solution along with a user document. No test document this time. And you'll submit it over eBridge by 9:30 on the 3rd of May. We've done it a little bit earlier than usual because the actual assessments start around 11 o'clock on that day, and it takes me an hour or so to get the assessments pulled off eBridge and then put onto the hard drives to send around the various marking stations in 321. So you've got that's it. You get the bank holiday, which is the Monday, which is I've been known to set deadlines on a bank holiday Monday, which is always hilarious and doesn't have to move it back. So that's when it's all due in. This is the standard stuff that we have in assessment specs. These are the things we're assessing. These go back to the learning outcomes of the module. So the idea is that these are the things we're actually after assessing during this assessment, and below that you've actually got a mapping of the assessment criteria to the learning outcomes to the mark. Now this is effectively telling you what it is we want you to do in terms of when you complete this course you will have these abilities. I don't think it's fair to say that you'll know how to program completely, because I've been doing it for a very long time and I still can't do it completely, but you should have enough to be useful and or dangerous with a computer, which is kind of where I like you to be at this point. So that's like the emphasis. You'll get feedback during the demonstration, and you'll also get feedback. The sheets will come back to you with the spreadsheet data on them as well. It'll all come back automatically. This is standard stuff. There's a code of practice on unfair means. By unfair means, I mean, means that are unfair. If you work with somebody else on a project, generally speaking, we'd encourage that because it's a good thing to do to share your problems and discuss. If that means we get 2 submissions which are completely and utterly identical, then that causes us to have to flag those and start investigating where the marks came from and who did what. So please don't make that a policy going forward, because it doesn't end well. It's you're kind of cheating yourself in that at some point in the course you'll be required to write some programs of your own for your project and for second year work, and so if you can't do it at this point, it's not going to end particularly well. So there is a code of practice there which I'm just pointing you at for reference. In terms of what you have to make, there are 2 different deliverables. Please, you can do both if you like. I don't really mind, although it's a lot of work. Do bear in mind one thing which is very important, which I'll make clear at this point. I can't give you more than 100%. I'd like to be able to do that sometimes, but I can't. What that means is that if you spend a ton of time on this and produce something which is wonderful, and we saw some stuff like this after Christmas, so around Christmas in the marking for 101, then that's fine. But if you fail another module because of the fact you spent all your time on the programming, then that's not fine. So do bear in mind that the other modules are actually quite important, so you have to pass all of them to get through the year, not just this one. So on that basis, I like good stuff. I like seeing wonderful. I've seen some awesome stuff in December. I'm looking forward to seeing what you folks do with these 2 applications and what comes back. But please do remember that I can't give you more than 100. And if you pass this one and fail something else because you spent too much time on this one, then that can be a problem. The only reason I'm really mentioning that is that I've seen it done. I've also seen people demonstrate wonderful programs that haven't been submitted to eBridge for some reason, which is also kind of interesting because that gives us problems in terms of the marking as well. So you pick one of the 2 and you do that one. The designs of the scenarios have been very carefully constructed to make sure we get the same learning outcomes from either. Both of them will require the use of a class hierarchy to provide a proper solution, and both of them have a similar level of complexity. So it's really a question of where your interests lie. If you fancy writing a game, then yes, you can write a game. If you fancy writing a line of business application, then you can have a go at that. No one is easier than the other. Both of them have some little gnarly bits in there which you have to get your head round, and that's exactly how it should be. So let's take a look at line of business first. Now, the idea is that we're managing a ski competition, so we're actually working for a customer who's organising this thing. And effectively what happens is over a week in the skiing season. When is the skiing season? Is there one skiing season? Over a week in the skiing season, we actually have to organise this thing. There's 3 different kinds of person that can rock up and actually want to take part in our competition. There's the amateur, who pays £100, and they just get one run of the course, and that's that. There's the professional. They have a sponsor and they have to pay £200 to take part, but they get 3 goes on the course and we pick their best score. Okay, and the third one is a celebrity skier who can come along and take part. They can take part for free. We have to record their next of kin and blood type for obvious reasons, so they go on as the third kind of competitors. So you don't have any control over how many of each will rock up. We could have everybody that turns up is a celebrity, or there could be all amateurs, we just don't know. So your system will have to manage that. I want to handle at least 5,000 skiers, which can be of any type. I'd like to think of you demonstrating it with a good number. In fact, the spec actually requires you to do this. The idea is that they come in they register at the ski lodge. They then are given a unique competitor number, which is the number by which the system will know them, and they then go off and do their run at whatever time is convenient for them, of which more in a minute or two, and then they come back with their score and their competitor number, and we enter that into the system, and that's them pretty much done. Okay, now during the competition, we should be able to find any of the competitors by their number and get their details out, and we should be able to make changes to those, so we can change their name and their address should we need to do that. When everybody's entered their score, there should be 4 reports that are generated. We should have the top 3 scores for each type of competitor, the top 3 amateurs, the top 3 professionals, and the top 3 celebrities. We should have the total number of entries of each type of competitor, the total scores for all the competitors that year, and the total income from all the fees. So this is basically a little bit of reportage you'll have to do on the data that's there. If you only have 2 professionals, then of course they're the top 2, and your system must handle that gracefully. So I don't want it blowing up if you can't find a 3rd celebrity to do the list and whatnot. Your system should actually take that on board, and it should store the details of all the competitors in a persistent way. One of the things we will do during the demonstration is exit from your program and go back in again, and we've got a strong expectation that when we do that, the information will all be there and retained, so you'll have to store it and bring it back. That's a requirement for this particular thing. Yeah, I'd like a test button on the form that makes 120 random records, so you can make a whole bunch of competitors. We've done creating random data in the bank, and if you're looking at doing this particular assignment, I would suggest that the bank is also one of your new best friends, because a lot of the behaviours that you're going to be doing and the things you're going to be working on will slide straight across. So you can use that as the basis, and I do not have a problem with you doing that because it's all part of the learning process. So we want 120. If you want to do more than that, that's fine. Up to the maximum, of course, of 5,000. The reason why I've gone for 120 is it'll be fairly speedy. If you have to store thousands or generate thousands, it might slow things down a bit, but you can be the judge on that one. What we've done, because we're nice and because we care and because it keeps you from being too distracted, we've actually built the UI. This is effectively a single WPF page which has got 3 regions. The region where you edit a competitor, the region where you create a new competitor, and the region where you get the actual reports back. And so I don't have a problem if you modify this to make it a little bit more artistically pleasing, but I do not want to have multiple different pages popping up all over the place. As you can see, we can fit all this quite comfortably in one screen, and then if the user wants to add a new competitor, they type in the name and the address, they select which type it is, fill the details and hit add. When they do that, the system then produces the competitor number at the bottom, which is what they tell the guy that's turning up. The guy turns up at the lodge. Who are you? I'm Fred. Where do you live? Fred's house. Are you an amateur? Yes, I am. Click. Da-da-dum. Hit add competitor. Congratulations, Fred. Your competition number is now blah. Okay, so this number here just tells them that's created by the system when they hit add. In the case of editing, competition number goes in here, we hit find, it then gets filled with the information which we can then change. One thing we can't do, the system will not allow you to change classification, so we can't stop Fred being an amateur, or we can't change him from these categories, but we can change his address and we can change his name. So what appears in here is just a description of what type of competitor he is and his sponsor, and in the case of celebrities, blood type and next of kin. So this is purely for viewing information, it's not for changing. Does that make sense? When you get his score goes in here, and you hit save to commit the changes that you've actually entered into the form if you have made any. You can't change the competitor number, and you can't change, as I've said, the classification of the actual person taking part. At any point during the process or at the end, you can hit the Create Reports button, and that will then populate this text block with the top 3 scores for each of the things, also the total number of entries, the total income, and the overall total scores. So basically hit that thing and that's your report generator. And then I put 2 red buttons in, which are going to be there for testing. We'll remove those from the final product. One is make test data, which is to effectively populate the database, and the second button does the clear. There's no save on this because I'm expecting that when you close this window, the saving happens automatically, and when you start the program, the saved data is loaded automatically. Now I'm going to do some bits and pieces on how you get those behaviours after Easter, but effectively there are ways in which you can run behaviours in your app when the form is opened and when the form is closed. So your program can get control when the form's loaded. There's a loaded event for the form where it brings in the data and populates what it needs to do. Similarly, when you hit that one, there's a behaviour which is to close the form, and those are part of WPF. So these are the fundamental behaviours. This is the form. If you go onto SharePoint, you'll find that in the assets for the application, there is a slab of WPF. It's a whole bunch of stack panels actually, which generates this UI. So all you have to do is go in and populate the behaviours behind the buttons and bind it all together. I don't want you getting distracted by UI design, and I don't want you designing UIs that you then can't make work. And if you have it over multiple forms, that kind of thing can happen. So does anybody have any questions on that? Yeah, at the back, sorry?
When you ask that for the website next of kin, if
yep.
you apply that to every compare, will you be penalised?
Yes. It's a good question. This is, I said each application has its gnarly bits. The gnarly bit, one of the gnarly bits in this one is when you're adding it, these guys are all called checkboxes, and they're not linked by the system. The system just lets you check. I mean, I can show you the code in action as far as I've got. Is it this guy? Yeah, that looks about right. This is the main window that I've done, and I'm not using grid. You can have a play with grid if you really want to do that. Come on, open up. But I just used a whole bunch of stack panels, and if you drill down here, you can see where they are. There you go, lots and lots and lots of panels. I've given some of them background colors so you can see what's what. But if I run this program up, which it does actually work, if I go into amateur, I can select all these tick boxes, and that's wrong. What should happen is when you tick celebrity, those 2 guys should clear, and then when I hit add, if these haven't been filled in, we should get a message. But you're not allowed to create a single catch-all class which does everything, and then just populate the bits that you want. What I want is 3 separate classes, one called amateur, one called professional, and one called celebrity if you like, and then those will be in a class hierarchy. Can you do that? Give it a go. I like that kind of approach. It's remarkably similar to Baby Account and other kinds of accounts that you might have seen, but I'm very, very keen to make sure that you keep the focus on the behaviours behind the buttons. And the ACW's strongly based on some of the stuff you did in the labs in the first 2 or 3 weeks of the semester. So go back and take a look at those, that you'll find they will help you a lot. So that's the Line of Business app in its raw form. Is everybody okay? Any more questions on that?
You know, based on the create report, is it based on which boxes tick?
No. That's a good question. When you create the report's created for everybody. So if I hit you can regard the 2 areas of the screen as being distinct and separate. If you want to put them in tabs, use a tab dialog box. If you know how to do that, then that wouldn't be a bad way to actually improve the layout a bit. But no, when I press report, I get the reports for everybody. The celebrity, amateur and whatnot is not a filter for that. It's just a way of saying which kind of person I'm creating. And there's a question at the back, further back.
I was just going to ask about tab boxes. Does WPF support tabs?
It does support tab dialog boxes, yes. That's the one enhancement I'll let you make to the UI, I guess. I'm perfectly happy. There's no reason to save screen real estate on the PC. It works fine. If you want to run a mobile version, I guess, on a smaller screen, you want to sort of flip between them. But that's the one concession I'll make to going nuts. Don't go bonkers with it. This design, I think people will quite like, and it would work. It's not massive. I could make the backgrounds different colours to make it a bit clearer which is which, I guess. But I'm not unhappy with this because why would I be? And so if you make the thing I'm saying is if you base it on this, then you'll be fine. You can get good grades and the code behind and everything will serve you well. I have seen people in the past who have made enormous, great big, complicated user interfaces and nothing behind them, and that's a worry. I don't want folks spending their time on that. So yeah, there's a couple of notes on the slide deck on the lab thing. These guys should be mutually exclusive, and it should be checked so when I hit add competitor, we know which one it is. When you hit add competitor, the number down there is the person, the number's been allocated for that particular person, and then you can search on them. If you think it's remarkably like a count number, you're not a million miles away. You could regard it as a count number if you wish. Any other questions on that?
When reporting errors to the user,
Yep.
is it acceptable to use a message box, or should we write text into the box and then into the entry boxes?
That's a good point. The question is, if we report an error, do we put things in here or do we have a message box? I'd make a message box pop up. I'll probably do both actually. I'd make the ones that are wrong turn red, which you can do. So if they hit a thing, if they've actually not filled in a blood type and they hit add competitor with celebrity ticked, then it should say insufficient data, and then blood type, the background should turn red, say. Seems quite appropriate actually. Yeah, okay. So you can do both. I'm not against pop-up boxes in the form of message boxes because people are used to those. What I am against is a box that pops up to say make a new competitor and then goes away when they've made it. I don't want that. Which is how come we've got this design. Anything else? Okay, if you work further down the slides, the document, then it says game. That should say application really, but yeah, life is a game, so that's okay. You can't have more than 20% for your add-ons. Two things about the add-ons that are very important. One is if you don't get the fundamentals to work, you don't get any marks for extras at all. So if you think you can pick marks up by adding extras, that's not going to happen unless you've got the fundamental going. The add-ons that we're talking about and their percentage that they can add. Search by name. At the moment, I'm searching by number all the time. We've had some discussions in tutorials about searching by name. If you want to do that, then you can have an extra piece of UI where you type in the name and hit find, and it has some kind of resolution so that if two folk have the same name, we can pick which one is the one we're after. That's important. And it's also important that when you are being marked, you have a way of demonstrating that. So you make sure the database has two John Smiths in it, so we can search for John Smith and have both of them pop up. So if you do the search by name, and that's true for all these guys, I want to see the workflow. I want to see it actually do that. So for 10 extra marks, you can pick up search by name. We also want to run a lottery. So you hit a button, and this is for amateur competitors only. So you hit the behavior, and it picks a random amateur competitor to be given, I don't know, a free bottle of Glühwein or whatever it is they give people at ski lodges. One thing to bear in mind, it's for amateurs only. If you make one that works for everybody, you will not get the marks. It's really important you read the spec here. If there aren't any amateurs in your data set, then it should say, I can't find you a winner. So I'd like you to think, we've had these kind of issues before with folk not reading the spec. In this case, it's for amateurs, not for anybody else, okay? And if you get that to work, and that should be half an hour's work, well, maybe no, half an hour, I'll do half an hour, then that's worth 5%. 20% is the real nasty. This one is, it's worth a lot of marks because it's quite tricksy. We regard the competition as being run over 7 days and between the hours of 8 AM to 6 PM. Entries start their runs at 5-minute intervals, and up to 10 can start on the course at any given time. So you can have up to, how many is that an hour? That's quite a few hours. 120 an hour? Is that right? Something like that. Maybe more than that. Anyway, what I want the system to do is select and manage start times for competitors. So we now have a scheduling element in there. Amateurs get allocated the first free slot when they register. So we just work through time actually allocating each successive amateur a slot. Professionals and celebrities can pick their start time. So for them, they can decide when they want to race. And for the professionals, they can pick 3 slots because they're professionals, they get 3 goes at the course. Okay? And if a professional picks 3 slots, they must be at least a day apart because they need time to recover, mend broken bones, all that kind of stuff. Celebrities just pick their 1 run, and then that's usually it for them. So the idea is that we want you to implement this and provide test data so that you can show us, and we'll be particularly interested in clashes. We'll be particularly interested in seeing what happens if I try and pick a date that's already been filled up. Will the system do the sensible thing and roll down to the next free slot? So this is fairly complicated. You need to make some more UI. It's not a particularly, it's interesting. It's a nice problem to solve. Of course, all the schedule stuff must be persisted. So if you actually quit the program and bring it back, you should still be able to do the schedule thing. So you'll have to do the UI and all the back end to make that go. That one's not particularly, that's an interesting problem to have a go at. And the last one is just adding some more data. We want to manage the age of each competitor as well as everything else about them. The important thing about the age, and again you'll be tested on this, the age is optional. Celebrities don't like revealing their age, okay? So it's an optional field, which means that during data entry we will make sure that you can leave this field out and the thing will still behave itself. And that means if we go for things like average age, we get the average age of the people who have given their age, not all the competitors. So you have to be careful of those 2 things. And we also want the youngest and the oldest competitor as well. And that's worth 10%. So you can build out that way as well. So those are the ones we've thought of. If you think of an enhancement that you'd like to have a go at, then absolutely come and see me, and we'll see what we can come up with in terms of marks for that. If you look on the mark sheet for these guys, then you'll find that we've actually got the marks allocated for the elements of the optional enhancements as well. So they're already on. Anything else that, if you want to go off-piste, to coin a phrase, and have your own enhancements, then come and see us and we'll effectively write something up, especially for you, if there's a particular thing you fancy having a crack at. So, any questions about Ski Lodge, competition management? Any more? Okay, right, that's one. This is the other one. Now, I knocked up the graphics really quickly, as you can tell, and I was trying really hard to make a really impressive looking skier, so I wound up with this thing, which is nothing impressive at all. But if you want to find some slightly better placeholder graphics, then fine. The point I'll make big time, this is not, I can't give you marks for graphic design. If you look at the learning outcomes for 08120 Programming 2, then there's nothing in there about game graphic design. It's all about behavior, objects, programming techniques, blah, blah, blah. So if you work with my graphics, which are also on SharePoint, then you can get 100% producing an awesome game just with these graphics if you want to do that. If you've got a friend who draws or you want to have a little go, then absolutely do that. Another point I'll make, it's in the notes. If you want to sell a game based on this mechanic, then go for it. Absolutely, best of luck. If you make $1 million, I will hate you. Although I think it's somewhat unlikely. But if you do manage to, if you want to get it out there, I've got some questions about t'other game. If you want to put it out there, please do. and if you send me a link to wherever it is you put it, then I'll promote it in the blog and wherever, because I love to see that kind of stuff. So if you want to improve the design, if you want to have poles that sway in the wind, if you want to have a rendered skier and avalanches that don't look like Captain White, then that's absolutely fine. And you can even replace the cheese with a different logo if you wish to do that. So by all means do that, but I can't give you marks for that. Much as I would love to, I can't do, because it's not what the course is all about. So what you've got is a skier, and he's in the middle of the screen and he can move up, down, left, right, and coming past him is the course, which is generated at the top and then moves down the screen. And the idea is that he has to stay between the red flag and the blue flag. If he hits a flag, he loses a life. If he loses 3 lives, the game is over. Every flag he goes past, he gets 1 point. And as the game progresses, the twistiness will increase and the gap between the flags will decrease. At some point in the game, fairly early on, we start getting the incredibly dangerous and actually rather unlikely horizontal avalanche takes place, where we've got snowballs flying across the screen, which he must dodge as well as the flags. So these guys, they won't aim at him, they'll just travel across the screen, and the number of them will increase as the gameplay progresses. But there are also pickups in the form of pieces of cheese, which he can pick up to recover lives. So it's a really sort of standard mechanic where you've got things to avoid and things to do. Again, if you want to go nuts with different kinds of cheese or other things, or different kinds of avalanche or yetis that come after you, I'm kind of okay with that. But do remember that I can't give more than 100%. Okay? If you're looking for something to put into your portfolio and show off with, then absolutely go nuts. But I can't give more than 100. And I've actually seen ones in the past where I would like to give more than 100, but I can't. So that's the fundamentals. Is everyone okay with what the game's supposed to do? It's quite good, because for the line of business app we have this big list of specs of what it must do, and for this guy you just got to avoid those things, pick those things up and don't crash into those things, and we're done. So in terms of class hierarchy, we'll be expecting you to have a sprite class hierarchy with maybe abstract sprite at the top, and then flag, and then player, and then cheese, and then snowball underneath that. So this is crying out for a class hierarchy, and that's what we would expect you to do. We would expect you to have a list of game objects in the game, exactly the same as we have a list of competitors in the competition management thing. I do not want to see separate lists of flags, snowballs, players, and bits of cheese. There should be a single list, and you can use abstract classes to make that work extremely well. The fact you've got 2 flags to define a row is interesting, but there's no reason why you can't do what I did. My game is not very impressive, because it isn't the game. My game, when I run it, excitement builds up. My game just does that. Then I can pick the player up and I can place him on the screen to make a nice photograph, and that's all my game does. But what I do have in the game, just to help you not panic quite so much, for looking game objects, I've got a sprite at the top, and I've got a player sprite, and then I've got a thing called flag row. And a flag row is a kind of sprite that contains 2 other sprites, which are the left and right flag. Okay, now I'll mention that because I like it because it's kind of weird, because it means that I've got in my class hierarchy I've got a thing that contains instances of 2 other things, but that's fine. And so when I make this thing, I just determine how far apart they are, and I move it around and stuff. So don't think about things, don't get too. I put the flags together and that worked for me. I'm using an interface called GameObject, and GameObject just has draw and update behaviors, which I call through from the main thing. So that's kind of how I started doing it. But then I found that I was spending too much time trying to write the game and not enough time writing the spec, so I had to stop because I get kind of carried away, because that's the way I am. But yeah, we have a scenario. We have the Intrepid slim downhill, but yeah, okay. So that's all how that works. Right. So where am I going? I don't know why that Why that's come there, I have no idea. That's very odd. I'll check the document. Right, okay, so these are important things. I don't know why it's put that picture there. Excuse me a minute. I think I'll just get rid of that. Better. I'll check that that's not in the real thing. So, these are the gameplay features you must have. We want to score along the bottom with how many flags he's gone past and how many lives he's got left. We want a play mode, which is the game as I have described it. A track mode, which is what you see when the game starts up. So if you get any game from anywhere, you'll find it has like a start screen or a track mode or whatever you call it. We want one of those. We want a gameplay mode and a game end thing. At any point during the game, you must be able to press N and start a new game. The previous game is probably thrown away, but that's fine. At any point during the gameplay, you can press Q to quit the game instantly. The movement of the flags should be the same every time you play the game. So what that means is that the actual way in which it gets closer and the behaviour of those kind of things should repeat. The idea is the player can learn the course. Now, that doesn't mean you have to use a lot of time designing a course. It does mean you can get busy with pseudo-random numbers. Now, we've talked about those in the context of making names and stuff, but you can make a random number generator which produces a sequence of numbers which is always the same, which is repeatable. So what you will do is you'll basically use that to generate the behaviour in your game and to produce the waviness. Also, we'll have a look. I'll do a couple of lectures a little bit later on in the course about each of these courseworks with a bit more detail how to do them, and I'll talk about sine waves. One of these few situations where a sine wave is actually a useful thing to have, because you can use a sine wave to actually place. That's how my test demo thing works, and by just changing the amplitude of the sine wave and its frequency so it goes backwards and forwards more quickly, you can get some quite interesting gameplay effects pretty much for nothing. So don't worry too much about that. Pseudo-random numbers are your friend and sine waves are your friend, but the sequence that you play should be the same all the time. We should see the score during the gameplay, and we need to store the score of the player who scored the highest. So when you start the game up again, it'll tell you high score, so many numbers. We don't need to store their name, just the score value. Okay? What we do need to be able to do though is store the entire game. So at any point I should be able to press a key to actually store the game and then recover it later and replay it. So just like in the ski lodge, you have to store all the competitors and their details. In the game, you have to store all the sprites and where they are, so we could store and recover the gameplay. This is a casual game. Casual games are played while you're waiting for the bus. When the bus arrives, you want to pause the game, get on the bus, pay the driver, whatever, and then pick the game up again. That's exactly what should happen here. Okay, does that make sense? So, yeah, there's the game. Press S, and you can press R to do a reload. The movement, you can use the keys on the keyboard. If you want to use a gamepad, that's fine. But you have to bring one along to the demo to show it off. If you want to write a mobile version that runs on a smartphone or whatever, or tablet, which you can play by tipping, that's fine too. And I can give you some advice on how to use the sensors in a Windows app to do that. That would mean you'll be using using Monogame, because that has those sensor inputs built in. And so the idea is that we can store the game, we can recover the game, and we can play the game. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? Yeah, sorry.
When a plane hits a flag, what happens if they keep going in the same direction?
If they go off piste, they'll actually they'll probably lose and try and come back onto they'll lose another light getting back onto it. I mean, does that mean you could career through the edge and just sit in one corner of the thing while the thing goes past? Okay, if they go off the edge, they die. Is that fair? Yeah. Does it? Okay. So if you go off piste, you're dead. Okay? Yep.
Left, right, up and down.
Yep.
Surely the skier can't go up.
Don't call me Shirley. Oh, I love it. Well, yes, he can. Because you can, if you're going down a hill on skis, I don't know much about skiing, but you can crouch down and speed up, or you can stand up and slow down. So yes, the skier, and this is not. I've taken advice from Kevin. This is not a realistic skiing simulation. We've discovered, okay, but he's got rocket skis on. Okay, right. He's got jet propel. But what are these things called that they hold out like that? Whatever they are, they're rocket controlled ones as well. So yes, he can speed up. You can just go downhill faster. It's a good point, actually. Yeah, another question? Yeah.
Yeah, with the movement, so it's optional to have the sort of like leaning.
Yes, we'll come to options in a minute. But yes, if you want to have him leaning into the corners, leaning back the other way. The tilt screen. If you make a mobile version, you get. I think there's a thing about that, but you get a big bump anyway. If you get it working on a tablet, come and show me, and that'll be worth quite a lot of %. Absolutely. Don't feel you have to, but it'll be awesome. Any other questions? Okay, so that's the fundamental behaviours. And then if we go down to the options, if he gets, I know he's going downhill, but if he gets tired, then he will slow down, and he can speed up again by picking up a piece of cheese. Cheese normally just gives him 1 extra life, but that's worth 5%. So you can pick up extra 5% by making the game slow down over time until he hits some cheese, at which point it speeds up again. If you want to add sound effects, I have not provided any sound effects in the assets, I'm afraid. So you may have to spend an evening going swish into the microphone. If you do that, that's fine. I don't mind. One of the best games I ever saw was one where all the sound effects were people going bang and whoosh, and it was actually quite amusing to do that. So yeah, spend 10 minutes with the microphone. Get a little Audacity. You know when you Audacity, get a little program for making sound files, and that's what I use. So yeah, add sound. Then that's worth 5%. Kevin did this artwork because it's actually almost sensible. If you want another 5%, then you can show the direction the skier is moving in. I don't have PNGs of this, so you may want to just cut those out or something, or I'll talk to Kevin and see if we can get hold of the original artwork if it's not been taken by some museum or whatever. That's worth 5%, just to show the direction the skier is actually moving in. So when the forward button is pressed, he'll be going down and whatnot. Okay, makes sense. Another good way to increase realism is to have a moving snowfield. So on this enhancement, what we have is as the flags move, the snow actually moves with them. It's actually quite easy to do because you have a texture which is larger than the screen, which you can scroll down, or you can generate. If you head of the GIMP, GIMP's a really good graphics program, and it has a special mode you can use to make repeating textures. And a repeating texture is one where this end and this end join up. So you make your scrolling snowfield by having 2 of these, and then doing that, and then taking that and putting it back up there, and then doing that, and then doing that. That won't show up on the video at all, but you get some benefit there. That's fine. So yeah, if you can use a repeating texture or something cunning, a very long thin one that wraps round or whatever, so that as the flags move down, the background moves down with it. So that's a moving snowfield. If you do that, that's worth 10%. Kevin is really keen on the last one, and he'll be doing a lecture on particle effects in X&M mono game next semester, after Easter, which you should really go to. What we want is, well, one of 2 things. If we get like a trail of snow produced by the skier as he moves over the snow, like coming out of the back like you've seen in these movies and whatnot, that's one thing. Or in addition to a track behind him that shows the last sort of 50 feet that's constantly redrawing. Those are both particle effects. If you put those in, they're worth 15%. So that's a nice sort of stuff coming out of the back of the skier as he moves. You could even do the same thing on the back of the snowballs as they roll across. In fact, that would be another good place to do it too. So if you want to go nuts with particle effects, that's absolutely fine. And Kevin will do a lecture on those after Easter, and you can drop those into your game for an extra 15%. As it says, by all means publish. I don't really care. Well, I do care because I want to see them. So if you make a game based on this, then I reckon it's a sort of 10-15 minutes of playground fun. If you get the high score thing working, you can get folks trying to beat each other. There's an evening's worth of fun and games in a game like this, so that's good. Important point in large friendly letters: please get the fundamentals to work before you start work on the extras, because if you don't do that, you're wasting your time, quite literally. Use the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet tells you exactly what it has to do to get the fundamental 40% for each of the things, and so make sure you've got those before embarking on the extras. It's dangerous because some of the extras sound a bit more fun than the real thing, but remember, you have to get the cake to get the icing, so get the cake working, please, and then move on from there. I've put that in big letters because that's very important to me. That's pretty much the end of the spec. I'll just mention very quickly again this guy, which is the spreadsheet. That's up there, so you can effectively, you could rock up to the demo with your own marks and just say, I reckon it's worth 85%, and this is why. And then we'll go through it, and we might even agree with you. That's not a bad way to do it. But yeah, front load. Spend some time over Easter getting the fundamentals going, getting your head around it, becoming new best friends with the bank. You can actually lift bank code and drop it into the game. If you think about the game as being a class hierarchy of sprites which you have to store information about, as opposed to a class hierarchy of competitors, then it all starts to make really quite good sense. And the only different bit is precisely what the front end does with them. In the case of the line of business app, it provides a UI where I can add people and find them and do whatnot. And in the case of the game, we're constantly spinning through and updating these things. One thing I would say is that, remember I talked in the game about this trick where when I'm doing the texture, I loop round, I have a one that goes round and repeats. You should not need to have more than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 10 flags in my game. That's all I need. So please don't have to have millions of flags that come down from the top in a huge array. You can actually get away with just using a smaller number, and then when one drops off the bottom, we put it back on the top. You can think of the flags as a particle effect, if you like. There's no reason why you can't do it that way. So don't think you have to have gazillions of flags to go past. I mean, XNA will take that. It'll handle that quite handily, but you can recycle these guys. So any questions on that? Does that all make sense? Okay, in that case then I hopefully have recorded this. So I'll put that up. The recordings take a bit of a time to process, so the ones from Monday and Tuesday might not be up yet, but they will be. Okay?